Hello everyone, my name is Stephen Redman. Welcome to Pastor's Library. This is the channel where we discuss everything to do with theology books, books that might have a place on a reading list for a seminary course, for a bachelor's or master's degree in biblical theology or biblical studies, or maybe just books that have piqued your interest because you've seen them online or you've even seen them on your own pastor's library. So whatever it is today, we're going to talk a little bit about an upgrade to a series of books, and one that gives us, I think, a fair bit of hope. So if you like what I have to say today, please leave us a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed, please click on the button now and click on the little bell, and that way you'll be notified whenever we launch another episode. So thank you very much for being with us today. Remember to leave any questions or comments below, because I do try to get back to everybody and I really do appreciate some of your comments. And I have to say, some of you, I am starting to think I should stop reading your messages because you are inspiring me to buy more books. That's a bit painful. Anyway, here we go. For someone who loves books as much as I do, you know I'm only joking. So, this is a book which is a book I have mentioned a few times over the years. This came out in 1995, so that's 30 years old. It's 202 pages, and it's part of the Cambridge New Testament Theology series. Now, 30 years old, is obviously ready for replacement, ready for an update. It was written by D. Moody Smith. I never read anything else by him, but I did read this. And I have to say, in some respects, whereas it was a helpful book to me studying the theology of the Gospel of John, I always felt this was one of the weaker ones in the series. So today I am able to introduce you to the 2025 New Testament Theology, the Theology of the Gospel of John. It's by Alicia D. Myers. Now, 30 years on, we've gone from 202 pages to 235 pages, so it's grown by 33 pages in 30 years. And whereas D. Moody Smith says in his conclusion something like, basically this gospel is really talking about Christology. And amazingly, Alicia Myers says very much the same. But I have to say to you, the approach of these two books is amazingly different. And whereas they are in agreement that John is, if you like, the gospel writer with the highest Christology, I think that Alicia Myers does so in a very remarkable way. And I really like her approach. Now, the only other book I've ever read by her is in the Reading the New Testament series. This is the second series volume, Reading John and 1, 2, 3 John, and those are called a literary and theological commentary. They're all subtitled that. And that came out in 2019, and I have to say, I think that is a brilliant commentary on John, particularly with its strong emphasis on the theology of John. So you can understand why Cambridge have gone to Alicia Myers and said, write us the updated New Testament theology volume on the Gospel of John. Now, this is, as I pointed out, called the New Testament theology. So in 30 years' time, when they're updating this, will that be called the New Testament theology? I don't know. I thought it would have been enough just to have called it the updated New Testament theology or something like that. But anyway, that's a fun thought for me. It's a sort of thing that keeps me chuckling as I go to sleep at night. So, what have I to say about this volume? Firstly, like most of these New Testament theologies, this is easily readable. It's accessible. You can process it fairly quickly. Most of these volumes I've read in 2 evenings. This one was no different. I think it's very good. Of course, being a 2025 volume, this has a very up-to-date bibliography, and I was interested by what she left out of this, but I was also very interested in some of the things that she included, and it has already augmented my reading list. So, just a few summary points which I think might interest you. I said to you that she recognises the Christology angle on this. She says, I agree with other Johannine scholars who emphasise that John's Gospel conveys its theology through Christology. Even though Jesus is the main physical actor, this is an outworking of the Gospel's theology. Everything Jesus does and says is a perfect reflection of God. And she goes on to say that the gift of the Holy Spirit enables the remaining disciples to remember and continue learning from Jesus' words long after his physical departure from them. So that I felt was definitely a couple of interesting comments. Now, the different chapters, the ones that I think summarise it the most, all in part 3. Part 1 deals with John's theology, past and current approaches, John's theological story, John's narrative elements. Part 2 deals with God's life-giving will, Israel's story and the gospel, Jesus' unique identity, revealing the Father, the world in need of a rescue, purification and exorcism, and chapter 7 is the family of God, believers, the Spirit and time. The last 2 chapters in part 3 are John's theological voice in the New Testament and John's theology in Christian history, continuing conversations. I think it is definitely an important point that Myers sees this not as an ultimate book, but part of a long-term conversation. And I think it's good that she recognises that. So she says here that the Gospel of John influenced not only what came to be known as Trinitarian orthodoxy, but also the questions that drove the debates that led to the Church's creedal conclusions. And she goes into that in a little bit more detail, which is definitely a worthwhile consideration. Looking at its impact in history, she talks about early church fathers and what John meant to them. And she lists that the gospel itself retains an ambiguity on these points. Jesus is both one with the Father, while also less than him. And the Spirit is at times sent by the Father at Jesus' request, or by Jesus himself. And I sort of hit this thing whilst also less than him, which of course is clearly not a Trinitarian viewpoint, because the Trinity is all about equality. It's the dance between the Father, the Son and the Spirit taking turns at leading. But she goes on to explain how that particular people in history have had that viewpoint, or whereas it may not necessarily be hers. The issue, therefore, is less about whether the Gospel of John is orthodox than it is about whether and which of its interpreters were ultimately deemed so. So she sees this as almost a litmus test for Christians through the ages, which I get that, and I think it's a very worthwhile thinking point. She also says that she believes that John is suggesting that Mary Magdalene and Mary of Bethany were one in the same, and she also goes on to say that John offers us a new imagination and a new way of living in the world, a way that is grounded in God's love for all creation, modelled in the life of Jesus, the Son, the Christ. Gifted with the Spirit, we are called to abide in God's love, which enables us to remain humble and open to God's continued revelation, regardless of the form it may take. And those are actually the last words in the book. I have to say to you that I took one look at this book and I thought, well, this New Testament theology does seem just a bit of an odd title. Alicia Myers, I've read one book by her, she was good, but, you know, is this going to be a little bit liberal? Is it going to be a bit watered down? And actually, I found it was the opposite. I found that this was actually a really good book by a good author, and I honestly felt Well, I felt I could read it. I wanted to read it in one sitting, but I felt I was passionate about finishing it off. I did have to go have 2 stabs at it to get there. But I really do think that it's not the ultimate, but it is a very, very, very good book. And I think at the moment in the UK, you can get this for about £22, which I would imagine would mean you may be paying, say, $30 in the USA. But whatever you are paying for this actually is very good value. And it's an excellent introduction to what, of course, will be a new series. And it will be a New Testament theology series. And so whereas I will probably chuckle to myself for years to come as new volumes of this come out, if they are up to this standard, I will continue to replace, because I think Alicia Myers has done a really good job here. And I think this sets a very good standard for the clear understanding of a high Christology gospel, and I think it will offer us a lot in years to come, and I commend it to you. So I hope that has interested you. If it has, then leave us a comment, and remember to leave us a thumbs up, because that helps as well. So thank you so much for today, and I hope that you have a great week. I look forward to seeing you next time on Pastor's Library. And until then, all I have to say is bye!